Hello again, everybody. My name is John D. Healy. I do a podcast. It's called It's Good to Talk, and it's good to talk. Always have interesting people on. Today will be no exception. Got into podcasting during lockdown. I produced a book for my good friend Stoney McGurn. The book is called And That's How It All Started. Life story since 1941, and he is still alive and well. My sponsors are Liffey Van Lines, a moving company here in New York City, named after a famous river in Dublin. If you're ever doing a walking tour in Dublin, you'll see the River Liffey. And when it comes to moving, let Liffey do the lifting. Always give a shout out to Paddy McCarthy of the Irish Examiner, a local paper in New York. All good events, Paddy McCarthy. And my guest today is Bill Schulz. And Bill is going to talk to us about New York City. He's a walking, talking tour guide. Bill, hello and welcome to It's Good to Talk. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, John. And I like that Liffey line. From now on, I'm just going to say, let William do the walking. I'm stealing that from the Liffey. I like that line.
Okay.
You know, I'm a sucker for alliteration. What can I tell you?
Good. So tell me a little bit about you. Where were you born? And I know as soon as you learned how to walk, you got walking, I guess.
Yes. Well, I mean, there's still some debate how good I am at walking, particularly after about 10:30 at night. But yeah, I was born in the burbs of Chicago, lived there for most of my life, and then went to college in Boston, and then I kind of just assumed I was going to live in. I decided that I was going to be a journalist, which was a really bad decision. And worse than that, print. Okay. Because I saw the future, and I knew it was newspapers. Yeah. Right. And so I went to Emerson College in Boston, and I to this day, I tell people, oh yeah, I was a print journalism major. And they're like, that's a major at Emerson? I mean, it's known for a little bit in broadcast, and it's certainly like a big, sort of like a poor man's NYU, I guess. It's a big acting school. But went there, got a gig, got a magazine gig in Manhattan in '98, a former magazine, which is redundant. They're all former now, called Details at Condé Nast. Moved to New York in 1998. Been here ever since. And because of my chosen profession, quote unquote, the increasingly diminished returns of both broadcast and print, and I've unfortunately been a part of both, I decided a little over a year ago to get my, and of course with New York, like everything, you need a license to do it. I decided to get my tour guide license and started doing walking tours since then with, I'll freelance occasionally, but it's been rough going lately.
Of course it is, yeah. During lockdown, that's when I got involved in podcasting actually, and I finished that book. Well, I used to do pop-up art shows, and I was able to do them outdoors even during lockdown. Thanks to the bars on the Upper East Side, especially the Five Lambs, Ryan's daughter. Those were very generous to give me space outside because we weren't allowed inside. So back to you and the walking and talking. During lockdown, were you able still to do walking tours?
During lockdown, I didn't have my license yet, but I had started becoming interested in doing it. You can probably tell by looking at me, I'm not the best at taking a test, and it is a ridiculous test that you have to take. And say if someone wants to do walking tours, which is basically what I do, I also have to learn all the rules of the bus tours as well, which I looked at that part of the test like my SATs with math, where I just went, so I just hit C's on all of them, rest of it. And so even though I didn't get the bus route.
Right. Okay. Well, to be quite honest, I cannot understand why they would connect the bus tours to the walking tours. Because
good question.
You're not driving.
Yeah, me neither.
You're not the bus driver, and if you were, I'd be kind of nervous, to say the least. I'd rather walk with you than drive with you. That's my personal opinion. I trust Liffey movers to do the lifting, because I'm not good at lifting. So that's how your walking tour started. Okay, I know you said you studied somewhat for it. So what type of research did you do before you got out there with your first group? And tell me about your first group, your first walking group.
Well, basically, I'm starting my own company, and I'm still in the process of doing that. As you can imagine, there's a lot of red tape in that. But the tour that I do this through is called the Bowery Boys Walks. And the Bowery Boys is this great podcast. I think I might have talked to you about a little bit about it. They started in 2007. Tom Myers and Greg Young. And it's essentially just New York history. And it's very well researched. You know, they don't just rely on Wikipedia pages. They're very funny. And they really did start it when podcasts were really, you know, no one even knew what a podcast was. And it went from having a cult following to just a huge following national. And so they turned that from just a podcast into a lot of events throughout the city where they'll do talks, always sold out. And then from there, they turned it into a walking tour thing. And I used to have a column in the New York Times on museums, and I would use them as sources all the time because I was just a big fan. And I was using them so much that my editor actually told me, Bill, you have to stop using the Bowery Boys, because it was just sort of almost every column I would reference them and use them for a quote. And so I think that helped me when I pitched the neighborhood that I met you at, which was PJ Clark's. Right. To paraphrase Mark Twain, walk what you know, and I live in Turtle Bay. And so I noticed that the Bowery Boys were not doing walks in our neighborhood, basically. I know you live in Harlem, but you're there a lot. And so I pitched Turtle Bay, or East Midtown, as it's otherwise known. And they said yes. And so then I just sort of had to start with the research from there. And essentially, as you saw at the beginning of my last tour, I started PJ Clark's and we sort of crisscross applesauce until we finally make our way back and forth all the way down to Grand Central. And so I try to cover as much of the neighborhood as I can. Obviously, there's so much history. It's essentially 400 years old. That's an impossibility, but we try to do some of the highlights. Lots of murder, lots of celebrity stuff, lots of mob. Boy, I didn't realize until I really started doing the research how much of the mob had their tentacles in this neighborhood in particular. Right. So it's a lot of stuff like that, lots of exclamation points.
Okay, well, let's start at the beginning again. Let's start at PJ Clark's. Okay, because PJ Clark's has a lot of history in itself. When you go in the doors, you see old body bones. Someone had their cremated. Their ashes is still there in a box. I hope I never have to get a martini with salt in it in case some new bartender will dip the glass in the ashes. There's also a pair of red boxing gloves behind the bar, and that guy is Darren Carl, and he was on before you just a week ago on a podcast, and he's a great, wonderful character. I've met some wonderful characters in there. And thanks to Jerry, the bartender, for making the introduction. He sees me and he almost knows, he knows what I like to drink. That's easy. And then he says, that guy down there, you should talk to him. And that's how I found Darren. That's how I found you. But let you give my listeners the feel for PJ Clark's. That's your starting point for one of the tours.
I didn't know about the boxing gloves. I'd always seen them, but you actually, and I'm always very happy. Nice. I can see you got a good hook in you. But I'm always happy that when people can certainly add to the tour, and you definitely did the last one, which was last Friday, I guess. But yes, PJ Clark's, basically, to define the terms of Turtle Bay, as the locals apparently call it, it's essentially Lexington up until about 55th, which is where PJ Clark's is on 55th and 3rd, and all the way down to the East River of the UN and to 42nd Street. That's essentially the neighborhood. And PJ Clark's is obviously an extremely legendary watering hole restaurant. It has been a staple of New York nightlife since 1884. And I've written a lot of articles about old bars for the Times and other places. And there are a lot, it's almost like trying to get a walking tour guide to have the oldest bar in New York. It's not just the edifice and it's not just the name, but they're so specific about some of these things that you have to prove that you've actually been in existence during Prohibition, which PJ Clark's absolutely was, as were a lot of other places too. I mean, there's this famous anecdote about an editor in Philadelphia who had hired a bunch of new scribes in the teas for, I don't know, the Philadelphia Examiner or something like that. And he told them that they had to go and take a train or whatever to Grand Central. And if they could not find a speakeasy within the first 5 minutes, they were fired. Because that's how easy it was to find and get a drink during Prohibition. And PJ Clark's, of course, was certainly part of that deal. But they hid in plain sight.
Well, Jerry, the bartender there, he's from County Galway. I'm from County Mayo. He's a big fan of Dolores King. He's a big fan of my young singer, Jimmy Grady. Jimmy Grady is related to Muhammad Ali, believe it not.
I love that.
Came from County Clare, Abe Grady. Jerry, the bartender, I think he's been there forever. I think he's been there since sometime after World War II, I guess. or maybe around that time.
Give or take. I'm sure he'd love to hear that.
He would. He'd love it. Well, he's still pretty swift for a guy that's been there since almost longer than Jeopardy's went on. I was up for Liffey as well. Liffey are going as long as Jeopardy too, but the river is going smoother. I'm going to ask for Jimmy. Jimmy, can you sing a song for Jimmy Schulz, myself, and the listeners? Jimmy, sing any song you like.
Almost heaven, West Virginia, Blue Ridge Mountain, Shenandoah River, dark and dusty, painted on the sky, misty taste the moonshine, teardrops in my eyes, country roads, take me home to the place I belong, West Virginia, mountain mama, take me home, country roads. All my memories gather round her, miner's lady, stranger to blue water, dark and dusty, painted on the sky, misty taste the moonshine, teardrops in my eyes, country roads, take me home to the place I belong, West Virginia, mountain mama, take me home, country roads. I hear her voice in the morning hour, she calls me. The radio reminds me of my home far away. Driving down the road, I get a feeling that I should have been home yesterday. Yesterday, country roads, take me home to the place I belong, West Virginia, mountain mama, take me home, country roads, country roads, take me home to the place I belong, West Virginia, mountain mama, take me home, country roads.
Jimmy, thank you very much. It's getting better and better. He's a lot younger than Jerry the bartender, that's for sure. But,
well, who is it? According to you and your age shaming with poor Jerry. Good Lord.
Jimmy's only 14 years old. He has a career in front of him. So tell me,
one of us
Bill, again, well, it's good to laugh. It's good to talk. That's the name of my podcast, It's Good to Talk. My guest is Bill Schulz. And if you like the podcast, just subscribe. It'll save me a lot of sending out to people. And now I'm on Spotify as well. I'm on Podpage too. So you'll get me. But now, speaking of getting, how do people get a hold of you if they want to book a walking tour? And how long is a walking tour? I don't mean how long in miles or blocks. But is it 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour?
It starts at 4. It starts at 3 p.m. at PJ Clark's, and it usually ends at the latest 5 at Grand Central. And in fact, the one that you saw, the last one I did, and this is sort of like. Okay. This sometimes is sort of a licensed tour guide's problem. I had, and he ended up being the best tipper, and he was just a sweet guy. You know, every once in a while, you get some people that do not move that quickly. And this guy, I guess he had some knee replacements or something like that. And so I had to end the actual tour a little early because he was going so slow. And again, I normally would be frustrated, but he was such a sweet guy that, you know, we were doing a snail's pace. And I basically only did half of the sites because it was getting close to 5. And we were still nowhere near Grand Central. I think I ended at Spark Steakhouse and the big mob hit that happened there. But that happens a lot. But yes, you can find my tour.
Have you ever lost anybody on a tour?
Yes.
They go shopping, then they come back, they join the tour, they go into Peter Clark's to use the toilet, restroom, and they come out, and you're gone. Do you hold a balloon over your... How do you have a flag or something?
I'm a very loud talker, so that helps. And also, some might say an abrasive talker. The one time that I lost someone...
Good talker is good to talk.
Well, thank you. But the one time I lost someone was, luckily, it was a friend of a friend, and they had decided to go to PJ Clark's about 2 hours early and indulge before the tour. And I think you know where I'm going with this. And they also, I think, might have had some gummies in them as well. And I remember when I saw them, and it was a group of 5, and it was very nice of them to, pad the tour. And some of them were friends of mine, other ones I kind of barely knew. But John, I got to tell you, they were out of their gourd, and they kept asking me questions about stuff I'd already said, and other people were starting to get annoyed by them. And there were at least 3 separate times where I lost them. Part of me was sort of like, yep, oh well, because they were so drunk and so annoying everyone else. But unfortunately, they would find us again after just blind, drunkenly, going the wrong, making a right when they should have made a left. But it was unreal. But at least they tipped.
A word of advice from Jimmy Grady, he's around there someplace. He sings the song Caledonia. And there's part of the lyric in the song there is about losing friends you need to lose. In other words, you're happy to lose them and move on and walk on. Other than that, how do you deal with people? I know you hit on it a little bit, but asking questions that are not relevant. We're in New York, and all of a sudden they see me and they start asking me about County Mayo in Ireland and the River Liffey. But you're in the middle of doing New York, and you're on about the East River and the Hudson River, not the River Liffey, and people get confused if they're not confused already.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it. Well, because I'm a dorky researcher as a journalist, and I did for Entrepreneur Magazine, in order to get my name out there and give the Bowery Boys another plug so that they hire me, I did a big, expansive story on how to become a walking tour guide for Entrepreneur, and it was a sort of cheating way for me to give publicity to all of these other tour guide, walking tour places, some of them in New Orleans. There's one in London, LA, and then a bunch in New York. I was able to interview them and pick their brain. And then obviously I was able to use that to get my license and get the Bowery Boys to hire me. But one thing that I learned from all of them, in a long-winded way of answering a question, is I'm normally not that pro people. I tend to think humanity is usually actually kind of bad, but I'm usually also wrong. And one thing I've learned about these guys is they said, look, if they're buying a ticket from you, and at least you kind of come off as if you know what you're talking about, these people are rooting for you. So for the most part, humanity is relatively good in these tours because they're 9 times out of 10, they're not going to try to trip you up. They're not going to want to ask you a question they know that you don't have an answer to. You're always going to have a dick like that. There's going to be one guy that just wants to ask the obscure question that really has nothing to do with the area, just to make you look like, an idiot. But most other people are rooting for you. As long as you can do your job relatively well, people are going to sort of act accordingly. And that's been, and I found that to be true now that I'm starting to do it myself. Like everyone that said that was for the most part pretty.
When I crashed your last tour,
Loved it.
Peter Clark's last, and I was like a drunken uncle at a wedding. I stopped and I said a few things and gave my knowledge of the history of Guinness, and then I said to myself, why am I doing this? Bill is getting paid for talking. I'm just standing up, holding up the show. But then I had to say to myself, I better walk and not talk. So I kept walking and you kept talking.
Well, no, but I was trying to get you to stay. That was an amazing cameo. And see, that's when it's really fun. And you were the highlight. But I'll tell you what, this also happened on the tour. So a lot of the times, the locals have sort of gotten wind of this thing. And the thing about this area of New York is there aren't that many walking tours, which is strange. There's a bunch of Grand Central, but inside, And so the locals have gotten wind of it. And so we had you at the beginning. And you gave a great anecdote about those boxing gloves, which I was not aware of. And then you told that great thing about the Guinness. And I was trying to get you to stick around because it was great. And then, have you ever been to, I don't know if you've been to Amster Yard. It's right next to Smith & Wollensky's.
Yep.
Yes, and it's this beautiful, not many people know about it, secret but available to the public garden that James Amster built in Amster Yards, Well, it's also this area called and my accents are so bad they're a hate crime, John. But it's the Español Cervantes or whatever it's called. It's basically a society run by Spain, and it's almost an embassy, but not really. And there was, when we were going over there, and I'm showing them the beautiful hidden Amster yard garden, this woman comes out and she works there, and she's cranking a heater outside. She's like, I know you. I see you do the tours in the neighborhood. She's like, did you know that James Amster was a total queer? And I'm like, oh, hey, oh, interesting. Like, I know he was an interior designer. She's like, yeah, he was, he was gay married, like 20 years before it was legal. I don't know how he did it, but he was gay married. But I bet you guys didn't know that. And I was like, she did it a little ineloquently, but it was still really interesting. And I'd had my suspicions, but the way she did it, it was so hilarious. And she was trying to help. It's not like she didn't like the tour. It was great. It was like, and you never know when stuff like that's going to happen.
I think what you did, Bill, is you still welcomed her input for what it's worth, and maybe other people thought, I never thought of that, like who would ever think? I did a podcast about Bishop Eamon Casey, and he had sex with a woman called Annie Murphy, and they had a baby, and they weren't sure what to do with the baby. And first of all, Bishop Casey from Kerry in Ireland, well, he decided, well, you got to keep the baby, I guess, but he couldn't keep the baby. Annie had her own situation. So the baby, first of all, they named the baby after Peter. I don't know if you know your history, Faith, not trying to stick you here, but I think Peter was the first pope ever.
Sure.
Peter. Okay.
I was,
correct me.
I was, as you can probably tell by the guilt, I was raised Catholic.
Well, I'm a complete atheist, but
I'm an atheist now too, as well.
Well,
I said raised.
I was never a very good altar boy. I must have been a very ugly altar boy because I never got good tips. But
I always say that. I never, no priest ever hit on me. It must have been a really ugly kid.
No priest ever gave me money for pouring wine. The only time I got paid money for pouring wine was when I became a bartender. But I must give a shout out to another guy, James Dennison. He's in Ireland. He does film work. And a number of years ago, he did something kind of linked to what you're doing in Harlem here. But he wanted to get Harlem as in modern Harlem. Harlem is beautiful now, and Harlem is in harmony. And there's a lot of Irish people in Harlem. So he did a short video link sketch thing of the owner of Liffey Movers at the time, Daniel Maloney. Eastside Flooring is here in Harlem, Jerry Flynn. Pat Clark has a construction company here. And he had about 6-7 people within a 3 or 4 block radius in Harlem, but all Irish, hiring local people, not just Irish people, like everybody, black, white, brown, gay, homosexual, transgender, even priests. As a matter of fact, Liffey has a priest working for them at the moment. I don't mean saying mass. He's lifting. When it comes to movement, at Liffey do the lift. So the tours always start at 3 o'clock at Peter Clark's.
Yes.
Now, how many days a week do you do a tour?
Well, hopefully more now that it's summer. It's been slightly slow lately. It changes every week, but there's an entire schedule on BoweryBoysWalks.com. Just find the Turtle Bay Tour. It's called just the Turtle Bay Tour. Easy enough to remember. Yes.
Okay.
And
you have a calendar up there, I guess. Yeah.
And I'm always available. Feel free to throw up my email, whatever you've got on. Unfortunately, talking to an Irishman, nothing is old in the United States. But I do a old bar, Revolutionary War themed a little bit in the South Street Seaport for the old bars that they have, which is nothing in Dublin. Like there's bars there's literally a bar in Dublin that's over 1,000 years old. So that's like Americans can't even wrap their head around that. But they're old bars for New York, is what I'm saying. And so I do a lot of that.
Bars are everywhere.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Well, now you're saying that this particular area. Oh my God, it's ridiculous. Yes. Yeah. You were saying that this is a particularly heavy Irish block in Harlem. Now, I used to live in Woodside, Queens. Is that still got the most off the boat Irish people in New York, or has that changed? Because it certainly was when I was living there.
Well, one thing that the Irish and Puerto Ricans have in common, apart from drink, is they're very hard workers. They don't suffer from xenophobia. So Woodside, Sunnyside, Flushing, Queens, Harlem, New York, Upper East Side, Lower East Side.
That sounds, yeah.
It's all the same. It's not like a huge world. You don't need a passport to get from Woodside to Sunnyside into New York. One more shout out for Dahi, who's an Irish speaker in Sunnyside. And we were on here and we did a podcast, Scalga, bilingual. And he taught me how to say the word Sunnyside in Irish and woodside in Irish. So for my Irish-speaking listeners, sunny side is Tív na Gréine. That means beside the sun. Makes sense.
Steve McGrane.
And woodside is the Tív, we say Tív on tree, beside the wood.
Tív on tree.
So those words translate. So Tív means beside.
Tív.
So before we wrap up, and I'm going to speak more Irish, because I'm like the walking part of your tour, and you're the walking, talking part. I don't want to lose you yet before we say goodbye in Irish. So strange people you ever had on a tour that just couldn't get it, apart from the ones that get drunk and they're smoking too much weed?
There is always that, and you learn, and that's the good thing. That's the adventure of walking tours is, you learn how to deal with things as they come, and there's always going to be something new, and you're going to have to get a weapon for that. Every once in a while you will get a jerk. And to answer your question, now I just say, please, I'm not a historian. I give my journalistic bona fides as much as I can, so it sounds like I kind of know what I'm talking about. But then I always tell people now, basically at the beginning of the tour, I'm like, please feel free to ask questions about whatever you want, and I will try to answer them to the best of my ability. I won't lie. But if it's a really obnoxious question and I absolutely don't have the answer, I'm just going to do this. And I walk right up to them and I stare them in the face in dead silence. And that right off the bat tells them, this is going to be so weird and awkward that I'm not going to do it. And usually it gets like a little giggle out of people because I just kind of do that in one person is the thing.
Like this podcast is called It's Good to Talk. Bill Schulz is my guest. I remember one time I had another guest on here. Her name was Dawn Doherty. And she teaches singing and she teaches music. And near the end of the podcast, she decided to play the pipe or the tin whistle. I didn't realize she had a dog in the room. So when she started playing, the dog started howling and barking. Have you ever had a situation where one of your people is walking the dog as you're walking and talking?
Every time, but the dog has never interrupted the tour. I always tell people that this is a neighborhood full of tiny dogs and tinier tipping diplomats, because the cliche of that neighborhood is that it's all these older women with these yappy, tiny little Ewok dogs, and then of course UN diplomats that do not tip their waiters and don't pay for their parking tickets, and that is the cliche of Turtle Bay.
That's a good definition.
Mm.
I think you explained that very, very well. I'll have to start tipping Jerry and Peter Clark's more frequently.
Wait, only tip him when he starts doing his job. Let's start there.
He's very professional. He's very professional.
But he's an absolute institution. Jerry's the best, and an amazing hugger for those of you that have not been to Clark's.
Yeah, I'm going to get a T-shirt for Jerry with the word TIPS on it. And now I've got a question for you.
By the way, you know what I'm embarrassed to admit is, as much as Jerry's given me all these great anecdotes about Clark's, I've never really asked him about the picture of him and Paul McCartney at the bar. I've never heard the story behind it.
It's right beside the two gloves.
Yes, I know, but I've never, and like he's got it so prominently displayed, I almost feel meager asking him about it now, so many decades after I've already been to Clark's as many times as I have. It's almost like embarrassing to ask at this point.
You could do it, like Jerry has a way of getting me to talk to people when he's busy, and I don't mind that because I realize he's busy. I used to be bartender. But TIPS means to improve prompt service. That's what a tip means.
True?
That is true.
I did not know that. Prompt service. That's amazing. How did I not know that? That's great.
You learn something new every day. And I think as well, I would definitely recommend you as a tour guide around New York City. Not alone do you get the history of New York City and the neighborhoods, but you learn new stuff. And it's good to talk and it's good to laugh, and you do laugh a lot, which is good. Better to laugh than to cry. And
yes.
I look forward to being somewhere with you on another walk and talk. I'm going to leave the last word to you before I sign off in Irish.
Well, I can't thank you enough again, John. Please let me know when next time you're at Clark's. Guinness is on me. I'll let you tip Jerry, though. Just BoweryBoysWalks.com, guys. And I am the Turtle Bay Tour. And again, the Toll Turtle thing is easy to remember. Go ahead, John. Okay. Sorry.
Bill Schulz was my guest today. If you like the podcast, there's 150 podcasts out there. Do subscribe. That's the way you best get them. Now I'm going to leave you in my Irish language. Slán means goodbye. Sin scéal means that's a story. Agus bé scéal ella means we will have another story. Bill, slán.